Hello all, and welcome back for a really quick tutorial for beginners. How do you cut the Imperial Size watercolor paper down to smaller sizes, but without cutting? So technically, we are going to be tearing the paper today. Now you're only going to need a couple things besides your paper: a sponge and something that has a hard plastic handle like scissors or a brush, a comb, for instance. So when you get your Imperial Size watercolor paper, it usually comes like this in a big package, all stacked up, really nice. We're going to do them one at a time, but you could potentially do more than one at a time. I just like to be very precise. So place it on a smooth, clean and dry surface. I use a cutting board just because I already have one on my desk. And you're going to want to fold it in half, perfectly even. So as you bring over one edge to meet the other edge, you can leave it open pretty loosely, just as long as you pay close attention to lining up your edges. And once you feel like your edges are lined up nicely, you can start slowly pressing down on that middle crease line. And at first it might seem a little tricky to press down that crease line as well as holding the edges even, but it gets a little easier as the more you do it. It's a little easier if you start from the middle of the paper and work your way towards the edges. But once you get that down, take your blunt plastic object, like I'm using the handle of these scissors, and rub it along the crease line, pressing down firmly so that it creates a nice hard sharp edge. And then you're going to flip it over. First, you can press it down with your hands lightly, and then take the same plastic object and run it along that crease line again. And by doing this, we're actually crushing and weakening the fibers just in that crease line, so that later when we go to tear it, it tears very easily and smoothly in a perfectly straight line. So flip it over again, crease it again, and then you want to take your sponge. I usually spray with a spray bottle just a little bit down the middle, just a single line down the middle of the sponge, because I only want to dampen the edge of the paper where I creased it. And once I do that, I bring the paper over to the edge of the table and just lightly tap it with the water on the very, very, very edge of that crease. Flip it over, do the same thing on the other side. It's not dripping, it's just barely damp. And all you need is a tiny bit of water, and it's going to loosen up the fibers just enough so that we can make a really perfect tear. All right, then you're going to want to lay the paper over the edge of a perfectly straight and flat desk or table. Don't use a table that has a rounded edge. Try to use one that has a sharp edge. Start off by creating a little tear on the edge of the paper just to start it out, and pull the paper directly downwards. Don't pull it away from the table, just pull it directly down. You're basically using that sharp edge of the desk as a guideline for tearing the paper, and then using gravity to help you. It should come off fairly easy, although I did have to give it a good tug to start out. And I think it depends on how well you crease the paper to begin with, and how much water you use to dampen it. From there, you're going to do the same exact thing with the smaller pieces you just created. So fold them in half again, perfectly even. Make sure you crease the line a few times on each side. The more you do that, the weaker that crease is going to get, and the easier it's going to be to tear it later. You can repeat this process as many times as you want to get whatever size paper you want. I was dividing my paper into fourths so that I would end up with 11 inches by 15 inches. For me, that's an awesome size for doing landscapes, which is my favorite thing to paint. So it works out really well. But I could easily divide it again and again if I wanted to make little study sheets or just smaller pieces. So it's totally up to you. I hope this helped you guys get an idea for how easy it is, and when you buy Imperial Size sheets of watercolor paper, you end up saving a lot of money rather than buying individual pre-sized sheets. So I highly recommend it, especially because the nice stuff can get pretty pricey. And as you can see, it does give you a very rough edge that looks great with watercolor paper. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.